This program was made possible by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Melinda Kiefer, and welcome to Live Green Tennessee, where we take you across our great state to explore agriculture, agritourism, sustainable living practices, and so much more. In this episode, we talk to Nick Patterson at Acres of Grace Farm, located in Red Bull Springs, Tennessee, to learn all about the farm's sustainability practices through the utilization of natural resources. Then we visit Frey's Sawmill, located in Tellico Plains, Tennessee, who cuts the logs the same way they have since opening in the 1950s, with an old-style circular saw, or some might say, the old-fashioned way. If you've ever wanted a log cabin for yourself, this family-run sawmill is one of the few places in the country that can make that happen. And finally, we sit down with Professor Robert Florence, Director of Tennessee's Soil, Plant, and Pest Center, who provides soil tests for farmers to test nutrients and organic matter to provide the farmers with the knowledge of how much fertilizer to use, which also impacts the environment and our local streams. All this in the next episode of Live Green Tennessee. Located in Red Bull Springs, Tennessee, Nick Patterson sits down with us from Acres of Grace Farm to discuss his family's commitment to sustainable farming practices. Nick believes that if one takes good care of something, it will in turn take good care of you, whether it's the grass, animals, water, or the environment. Acres of Grace strives to maximize every aspect of farming with nature for ongoing sustainable practices.
As we are here in 2019, we row crop right around 1,000 acres, and that would be between where we live here in Clay County, Tennessee, Monroe County, Kentucky, which is right across the line, and Warren County, Kentucky. And then we also maintain pasture land for animals in Bowling Green, here where we live in Clay County, and actually also down in Alabama where I'm from. We've got about 1,000 acres of row crop. We've probably got about 800 to 900 acres of pasture and forage land that we raise cattle on between the three places. So back in July at the Tennessee Young Farmer and Rancher Conference, we were named the 2019 Tennessee's Young Farmer and Rancher of the Year Award here for the state of Tennessee. That's a program that's done through the Farm Bureau here in the state. We were awarded that based on our farming operation and how we've grown it over the last few years, as well as our community involvement, community leadership. I think that one of the biggest things that we did were just trying to set goals on the farm. That's one way that we were able to achieve the farm growth that we have been. I think one of the things about Farm Bureau is we love agriculture in general, and that's just part of who we are. But the Farm Bureau is an organization here in the state that represents farmers and ranchers and the people of Tennessee, not only here in the state, but also in a national level as far as looking at political things that may affect farming practices here in Tennessee and the country. And from the time that we've been involved, we've really loved and appreciated that organization. And so being a part of that organization, being a part of what they stand for, and then also trying to be a part of and doing things here in our community, both from the Farm Bureau perspective, but also just from us being, trying to be good neighbors and give back to the community. So we raise row crops, so corn and soybeans would be our main ones. Sometimes we do wheat, and then we do cover crops behind the crops to try to keep something growing in the ground all the time. And then we also have a livestock portion, so we raise mainly beef cattle. Their ultimate goal is to go into the food supply chain as beef cattle, but we have what would be called a cow-calf operation. So we keep the mama cows and breed them back each year for them to have baby calves, and then those calves eventually would either stay here on the farm as females or go into the food chain. Along with the beef cow operation, we're also a cooperator herd for a ranch in Texas, the Hart Brand Ranch. They raise and sell Akaushi cattle, and so they're one of the Japanese Wagyu breeds. They were brought over here in the 90s, and so that's the Akaushi bulls are what we use on our cows. And so in our cooperator herd role, we have 25 of their cows that we calve out here for them. Sustainability is one of our 3 keywords in our farm. So if you look at our Acres of Grace some of our logos and our website, there are 3 words that we picked out to define who we are, and 1 is sustainability, 2 is stewardship, and 3 is servanthood. We want to raise them the best that we can for them to be healthy and thrive. One of the main things we do with the row crop side is we no-till, so we don't do any tillage unless absolutely necessary. There are times when it is, but for the vast majority of our acres, they don't get tilled. We have the means to be able to do that, so we're not disturbing the soil any more than we have to, which means that it stays in place and is not driven away by the wind or the rain like it would have been in previous generations that didn't have some of the farming technologies that we have nowadays, and that's where the cover crops come in. So when we take our cash crops off, we're always trying to grow something on the ground, and so we're able to cut down on weeds. We're also able to keep nutrients in place in that ground, and so we have a really good nutrient cycling within the soil. And then whenever we can, we actually add livestock in there. So some of our crop fields will grow a cash crop, plant a cover crop, and then graze that cover crop with our livestock, and they turn it into even more valuable manure. So it's really good cycle within that sustainability, and that's something that we try to shoot for. Wheat is one of those things that it can double as a cover crop or a cash crop. We've raised it for both in the past. We've kind of progressed now to where we're doing several mixes, and so in the industry we'll have a grass, which could either be ryegrass, triticale, or wheat, and then we'll mix it with a legume, so crimson clover, winter peas, and then a lot of times we'll add what's called a brassica or another species. So there'll be radishes or purple top turnips, or we try to do, several different mixes. If you look at the science behind it, the microbes in the soil love different types of roots. So instead of just going with a monoculture like we raise a lot of our cash crop, we try to give them different things to eat on during the winter. Both of our cash crops would go into the livestock feed sector. So both the corn and the soybeans would go to eventually make animal feed. And then we do some wheat every now and then when the right fields come up for a rotation or if the market is good. Most of our corn is going to go to livestock feed. So we have some local feed mills that we sell some corn to, and they're going to be mainly for beef cattle feed. And then we also sell to a very large poultry feed mill. In our area there are lots of poultry houses, so some of our corn will also go into their feed to make their feed each day. Sawmill operation, through Moss Sawmills and our timber management here, we're able to harvest the tree and we make mulch out of the waste products, we make chips, we burn our sawdust for our lumber. Agriculture, the way that we do is just another facet of that, So I think the sustainable part and the nutrient recycling and trying to make use of everything is a very long-term thing, and I think that's just a thing is just not thinking about right now. Our forest management is, okay, we're going to manage it this way so that in 15 to 20 years we can come back and get another crop off of it rather than just cutting everything and it being 40 to 50 years. So I think we have the same thing here, just integrating what we can, reusing manures, using the animals to nutrient cycle. I think one of the other things that we do on our farm is that is technologically based is our soil sampling that we do on our fields are done in 2.5 acre grids. So if we go into a 100 acre field, it would have had 40 different soil samples pulled on that field. And then when the truck goes across it, if it knows that it needs more phosphorus in this area, that truck is able to increase the rate of phosphorus. But then in the areas where it doesn't need it, we reduce that rate back down. So we're just responsibly trying to use the nutrients that we put out. And I think just all just ties together. So I think a really interesting thing too about our agritourism event is April's granddad used horse-drawn implements on his farm, and that was just 2 generations ago. And so we have those there in that barn that we're able to show that, but then literally right across the street we'll have our tractors today that are GPS guided, that drive themselves. We have precision planting on our planter that plants within an inch or 2, knows where it's planted and will not overplant in areas. And so I think that's one of the things that we are able to show people is the contrast of not that long ago how people had to farm versus what we're able to today because of technological advances. And so, our story is that that's where we started, and we've just tried to progress each time, stay kind of abreast of the new technologies so that we are better stewards and more sustainable each way that we can be. We all have to eat 3 times a day, but we're trying to do it in the most environmentally friendly, sustainable way that we can. It's one of the things that I love about agriculture is the part that we're able to play in people's lives and they may never even realize it.
Located in Tellico Plains, Tennessee, Frey's Sawmill cuts logs the same way they have since opening in the 1950s, with an old-style circular saw, or some might say the old-fashioned way. If you've ever wanted a log cabin for yourself, this family-run sawmill is one of the very few places in the country that can make that happen.
To get an idea of what goes in and out, we bring in 100 tons of wood and we send out 100 tons of wood each day in one form or fashion. Most of the modern mills have went to bandsaw mill, which is thin curve, but we stayed with the circular sawmill, which is reminiscent of traditional methods. And with the circular sawmill, you have the marks and the markings that a lot of people like to see in their homes if they're wanting to have a rustic type of home. And so it's helped us to have a little niche there also. Frey's Sawmill is located in Coker Creek, and we still get logs from about a 50-mile radius of this area. The sawmill got started when my dad started one in 1953. He used to cut timber for different mills, and then he had a friend of his talk him into buying a sawmill. And so he did, and that started everything. Since then, as we were born, we just growed up into the sawmill. Spent all our time, our extra time here, and that's just always been a way of life for us. Using a circular sawmill is more traditional, and you have some things that you lose by doing that. You don't have the efficiency of a bandsaw mill, so that means you're going to be producing more wood waste. But we've been very fortunate as far as the wood waste. We're close to 99% of everything that we're taking out of the log is being used in one manner or the other. So really wood waste, it ceased to become an issue. So that provided us the emphasis to keep on producing and using the circular saw, and so it's worked out very well for us. Today we'll be delivering to Robbinsville, North Carolina. We took one delivery south of Cleveland already. That's went to a chicken farm, and done took one to Maryville College to help heat the campus at Maryville College. We'll take them to chips, and they'll take the chips and put it in their boiler up there, and that heats the water. And then, of course, the water goes into steam, and that heats the campus at Maryville College. It saves so much off of the gas they would be using, the petroleum use, and I understand it's 1/3 the cost of what it would be to them if they were using the straight gas. We deal in hardwoods and softwoods. We have a lot of business that we do in the white pine market. White pine are used in the log home industry. We'll cut beams and cants and, of course, the logs for the log home building. The log home got started back in the 1990s. We're getting do-it-yourselfers that are getting interested in building their own log home. A lot of people will let someone who is more knowledgeable about it build it, and then they will go in and finish it themselves to try to save some money. And yes, we have seen a lot of interest in it. Well, I love making things, and there is something that is just well worth of a day to make things. We've been able to get some people into some log homes that couldn't do it, and we showed them some ways that they could do it, and that means a lot. We've made a lot of good friends, and it's great to meet with these people. I was in Cleveland not too long ago and went into a Tractor Supply there, and I was just bombarded with the different people who've been our customers through the years. I don't know, it must have been a special day or something at Tractor Supply, but it seems like everybody in the area happened to be coming by, and it was great just to meet with them. How's your home? How's it going? And so we make friends, and there's no price on that. People come in and they'll, there's songs written about my Tennessee log home. And so there is a history with that. And when we talk about any of our ancestors, if we talk about their dwelling, we're going to go straight to the log home topic. And then we'll start talking about some of the methods they use. And We'll start talking about the dovetail in the corners, and then we'll start talk about hewing, and then we start adding all these components. These are components that were devised 200 years ago. And so we talk about doing that now, and I really like that. That's kind of neat to realize that there was so much ingenuity that long ago and that we're still using it now. We all have to be certified. I have the certification myself too. We have to keep this updated. It's a Master Logger program in the state of Tennessee. We all have to abide by the Sustainable Forest Initiatives. And so that means we have to take a lot of thought into what we're doing. We are checked on all the properties. All of the private properties are under state guidelines in the state of Tennessee, so we are checked by the state whenever we're on any private property to make sure we're following all those guidelines. They will make sure that we're doing the logging technique properly and that we're doing everything that we're supposed to do to take care of the environment. Make sure you're not getting close to streams. Make sure that you're taking care of the wildlife by resowing the logging roads and just doing good management. I love it. We really appreciate being able to do that, and we appreciate being able to go to people's homes and say, well, we couldn't find this anywhere else, and we were able to find it at your place, and to be able to provide that for some people that you did things that they couldn't find anywhere, and there's a little bit of gratification in doing that.
From the University of Tennessee, we sit down with Professor Robert Florence, Director of Soil, Plant, and Pest Center, who provides soil tests for farmers to test nutrients and organic matter, as well as testing for disease for crops and forages to provide farmers with the knowledge they need of how much fertilizer to use, which also impacts the environment and our local streams.
My title is Director of the University of Tennessee Soil, Plant, and Pest Center. So at the Soil, Plant, and Pest Center, we test soil samples for farmers and homeowners for their nutrients, texture, or organic matter. We also test plant disease samples for either in their home or on row crops or in their forages. We also can test samples for plant tissue nutrients. So if they're having a nutrient deficiency in the field and maybe it's not showing up in the soil test, we can test the tissue and see if there's nutrient deficiency in the tissue itself. And then we can also test for greenhouse media. So if you have a greenhouse and you're using greenhouse substrate, or if you're using raised beds in which you're using like potting media and not necessarily the soil from the ground, we can test that as well. Testing the soil is so important to farmers because it allows them to know how much fertilizer they need or don't need. So it's beneficial to the pocketbook so they don't overspend on money to put down too much fertilizer, and it's also beneficial to the environment. It's also important for homeowners to check their soil test as well for the same reason, and also to prevent freshwater bodies from being impacted by too much phosphorus. So if you have too high of a soil test phosphorus in your lawn and you apply phosphorus over and over, if everybody in your neighborhood did that or everybody in your water district did it, eventually it would build up in the freshwater bodies and they would have algae blooms, and that would not be good for the fish nor for recreation. Soil testing is very important from a water quality standpoint, from the idea that soil runoff may carry phosphorus with it, or excess phosphorus applied to soils will also have water runoff with it. As far as it'll rain, the phosphorus on the soil will go into that runoff into the solution, the water solution. It'll then run into your lake or your stream, and it'll impair the water quality by having algae blooms. So the algae will bloom, microorganisms will use up all the oxygen, so the water will then be depleted in oxygen, and you could possibly have fish kills. You can also possibly have algae blooms, which would produce a toxic substance where you can't actually get in the water. Phosphorus is a macronutrient, so plants need a lot of it in order to have high yields. Some soils are naturally low in phosphorus and some soils are naturally high in phosphorus. Phosphorus is the most important aspect from the nutrient standpoint in Tennessee for water quality. Too much phosphorus in freshwater bodies can cause algae blooms that can lead to fish kills or also lead to toxins being released in the water. So ways to prevent too much phosphorus going into freshwater bodies is having your soil covered, right? So preventing soil erosion. Sometimes even just having weeds on bare soil is better than having bare soil itself, because if you have a lot of rainfall, the rain can hit the soil, it'll loosen it, and it'll wash it away. And as that soil gets washed away, it's carrying phosphorus with it that could cause trouble. Another way is if you over apply phosphorus. So when you're spreading your fertilizer, make sure to spread it on the garden or on the lawn, but not get it on the driveway or sidewalk or the street, because it will go down the storm sewer, which will go to another freshwater body, which would definitely contribute to some water quality issues. So there are several options for fertilizer for gardens. And some of the natural options are things like bone meal or blood meal. So bone meal would be high in phosphorus, blood meal would be high in nitrogen. You would figure out the right rate of those products by testing your soil. Go out to your lawn or your garden, and from 6 or 7 or 8 different spots in that area of interest, right? So it's your front yard or your garden, you would take 7 or 8 different subsamples to try to represent the average of that area. Take a 0 to 6 inch depth sample, mix those up well in a bucket, and then of that well mixed sample, you can put it in a soil sample box and ship it to the lab. And for $15 per sample, we can analyze the soil for pH, phosphorus, potassium, and many other nutrients as well. That'll come back in a report for your specific crop or lawn, whether you're doing a cool season lawn or a warm season lawn. We can tell you when to apply the fertilizer and how much to apply. And then so the idea is on fertilizer bags, you have the guaranteed analysis, right? So you have 3 numbers, and usually it's nitrogen, the P2O5 equivalent for phosphorus, and the K2O equivalent for potassium. And so on that soil test report, you'll get back apply this many pounds of nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. And so if you go to a store, you can choose between many different types of fertilizers, right? And those percentages in the bag help you figure out how much to apply. So if you need to apply 1 pound of phosphorus per 1,000 square feet, and you go to a store and they have a product that's 10% phosphorus in the bag, then that means you need to apply 10 pounds of that product per 1,000 square feet to equal the 1 pound of nutrient that the plant or crop or lawn would need. So a common question we get at the lab is, what's the best soil? And it usually depends on what you're doing with the soil, right? So you would want different soils for different situations. So for example, if you were maybe not in Tennessee, but another southern state, if you're doing peanuts, you want a sandy soil. Or if you're doing potatoes, you'd want a sandy soil, right? Because you have to dig up all those peanuts and all those potatoes. It's a lot easier to dig them up from a sandy soil than a clay soil. And same thing for different crops that may like well-drained soil or soils that don't drain quite so well. So the best soil really depends on your application of it and what you're going for. So loam is equal parts sand, silt, and clay. So what that means from a water standpoint is that it's not going to drain nearly as fast as a sand would, but it's also not going to hold on to as much water as a clay would. But from a lawn or from a garden standpoint, that could be good or bad, right? So if you have a lot of rain, eventually you may have ponding water, and the plants may drown if you have too much water. So those are the things to think about when you're thinking about water in a soil and the texture. They're 2 very related things. And then also, what does your plant like? So if you know you're in Middle Tennessee or most of Tennessee and you have a heavy clay soil, you may think about amending it with some organic matter to help it breathe a little bit, or you may think about planting plants that can deal with that clay soil. Another common question we get at the lab is how to interpret a soil test when you get it back, right? So you went through all the work of taking your sample and sending it to the lab, and now you get this report back and there's a lot of numbers on it, and it may not always be the easiest of things to understand. So usually where you start is look at the pH and see what is the pH. And the number you get back for the pH is meaningful to the plant you're going to, right? So if you're doing blueberries, a low pH may be what you're going for. If you're doing alfalfa, a low pH would be very bad. You want to put lime down and raise it up higher. Or maybe you're doing corn or soybeans or just a vegetable garden. When you get that pH number back, its interpretation is based upon what plant you're going to. And then there's also going to be a buffer value on the soil report. It just tells you the soil's resistance to changing its pH, right? So if a soil has high resistance to changing its pH, you're going to need a lot of lime to change it. If it has little resistance, you can use less lime. So the 3 ways to think about liming a soil are, what is your current pH? So that's where you're at. What is the plant or crop you're growing to? That's your target. And then what's the buffer pH? That's how hard it is to go from where you're at to where you're going. And then other questions about soil testing are, they see that we don't test for nitrogen in the soil. And a lot of southeastern labs don't test for nitrogen routinely in the soil for a couple of reasons. So as soils warm up in the springtime, the organic matter will mineralize and a flush of nitrogen will be released. So there's a timing aspect of it, but it's also very mobile. So once nitrogen is in the nitrate form, it's very mobile in the soil and it'll flush through those 0 to 6 inches, not rapidly, but fairly fast. So a normal 0 to 6 inch sample that's good for pH, phosphorus, potassium, and everything else is not necessarily good for testing for nitrogen in the soil. So a lot of times what southeastern universities do is they make nitrogen recommendations based off the crop you're going to, and they'll usually give you different timings of that, right? So because nitrogen is mobile in the soil, you probably want to split apply your nitrogen product throughout the year so it's there when your plant needs it.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Live Green Tennessee, where we take you across our state into the farms and businesses of those who are making the moves to eating fresh, living sustainably, and helping us all be more organic in our thinking and the way we live our lives as Tennesseans. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time on Live Green Tennessee.
This program was made possible by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.